Hello, everyone. So I'm Matthias. I'm the founding partner at ChainSecurity, one of the audit companies of many of the large DeFi systems and stablecoins out there.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nikita, co-founder of ChainPatrol. We help protect communities from impersonation, phishing, all those fake Twitter, Telegram profiles you see. We work with a lot of the top projects in the space to basically blocklist them, take them down, and keep your users from getting drained.
Hello, I'm Fedor, co-founder of Resolv. Basically, we are making tokenization of different trading strategies, and one of our core products is stablecoin. So I assume I can be considered as a customer of all of those guys, or potential customer. So.
Right. Hello. Yeah, I'm Markus. I'm glad I got the only space in the shade here. I'm core engineer lead at Injective Labs. So we're a layer 1 chain built for finance. And yeah, I mean, I've been with the team now for 5 years, which I guess 5 years in crypto is like 20 years in real life.
We've got a good mix of voices here, right? We've got security providers on one side, and a bit outweighed by the protocols we serve, but it's very important to have your voice here. Let's start with the current state of on-chain defense, right? We're seeing, of course, capital and the complexity of chains increase. Capital is flowing in, but threats are scaling with it. I saw a report today which showed that the mix of threats or the mix of hacks is changing, right? Last year, it was a lot of code-based hacks. Now it's a lot of no-code-based hacks, something, Nikita, you would be familiar with. So I want to get your perspective from everyone here on what are the biggest gaps in on-chain security today, right, from your point of view? And I'd love to start from the users first, right? Like hear from Markus or Fedor. What is your point of view on the biggest gaps in on-chain security? What's missing to unlock the next trillion or decatrillion in institutional adoption?
Yeah, I mean, I can say from Injective's perspective, I would say the two big things are automation and speed. So one is like, I mean, detecting, I guess, is security issues is on a live system, right, is relatively easy. But then actually like having an automated response that is also timely and fast enough. You obviously need to think about that much in advance before when you start thinking about it when there's an attack happening, it's too late. And in particular for us on our chain, I mean, we have one of our advantages. We have instant finality. When it comes to hacks, that's a slight disadvantage. On Ethereum, you at least try to catch up with an attacker. For us, it's instant, so you really have to make sure that you have a timely response in place and build your systems, protocols, or the chain itself from the ground up, knowing that an attack can happen, and you have certain systems in place already.
So responsiveness and speed is super critical from your point of view, which you think is not there today.
Well, we're on the way to getting there, right?
Okay, got it. And Fedor, would love to get your point of view, but also kind of understand sort of how have your needs evolved over the course of the development of the product?
Yes, so I mostly agree with the point of view, but I would probably, answering your question, I would say like, think a little bit bigger outside of the context purely of Web3, and especially if to talk about potentially wider adoption or institutions, like you mentioned, like many of them and like on longer time horizon won't restrict themselves purely by Web3. Like more likely it will be like something with Web2 and Web3 part. And in my personal perspective as customer, like a lot of Web3 security companies like forgetting that many products like might have like Web2 parts as essential part of their products, and it have to be considered in common context.
Gotcha. And just to follow up on that, I mean, from your point of view as end customers for security, how do these security requirements evolve over the course of the project? What's been the evolution of security requirements from your point of view, Fedor?
Well, it's hard to answer specifically, but just probably can give a couple of examples from our practice. Just to add a little bit more context, we are making a product which is not purely on chain. Like we have a lot of smart contracts, like unrelated logic, and we have a regular backend, like fintech kind of style, and they're working together. If we are auditing, for example, smart contracts, we might have like certain roles available for the backend, like to trigger, or like backend like acting, like reacting on events or something like that. And it's like in certain cases, it might be hard to audit, for example, smart contracts in isolation without knowing in what conditions it may be triggered via backend or like something like that.
Let's switch over to the guys on this side. What's your point of view? I mean, and I'd love to get your point of view with some sort of perspective on the users, right? What do you see builders in Web3 not really focus on sufficiently when it comes to security?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have to say I agree with the, well, honestly, like, systems need to be real time. They need to be as quick as possible. I think a lot of people, like you mentioned, have built detection, but it's, okay, we detected a hack. What are we doing about it? And it's tricky because sometimes that might mean you need to have some sort of fail-safe inside of your smart contract, but then that introduces a certain type of risk now because you have an external control that might be able to pause it or do something else, which you may or may not want. But that's talking about kind of like the fully the on-chain security, but all of this system lives within a wider kind of set of security issues, like you were kind of mentioning, is that, we're all using GitHub for our development, like that can get compromised, that can get, some bad code push. If that's connected to your deployments, that can actually trigger an automatic deployment, potentially overriding your smart contracts. We have security council members that, if you phish enough of them, you can get access to, the multi-sig and make a transaction happen, right? So I think it's, crypto Web3, it's all really built on top of it's not separate from Web 2. It's built on top of Web 2. That means we've inherited all the same security issues. And I think what we've done really good as an ecosystem is tackling some of the unique new issues that have come. Like, I think nobody longer debates do we need an audit or not. Like, we obviously all need audits. Like, that is the critical part. But I think everybody's fallen into this trap a little bit of thinking everything's happening on chain, when in reality, unless you're deploying a purely immutable contract that literally will never change, that's not the case. There's upgrades that can happen, there's multi-sigs that can be compromised, and at the end, at the core of that is basically people. It's basically your team getting compromised through sophisticated spear phishing by DPRK or others, or really just any sort of confusion that can happen within your team. So I think looking at, as much as we want, there's a whole kind of code is law kind of group of people, but I think that is very far away from the reality of where we live in right now, which is, people are probably the weakest point, I would say, in the whole chain of security that we have.
Nikita, is there an incident that comes to mind when you're speaking of this that you can share? And I'm not going to put pressure on you.
I mean, maybe the obvious one is the Bybit. I mean, I don't want to throw too much shit on them. I think they actually handled the comms and the recovery and the kind of dealing with everything after the attack very, very well. But if you follow the trace of everything that happened there, in the end, it was phishing at multiple levels. It was developers that had access to GitHub. This was related to some another provider that they had. I don't want to throw too much shade on anybody in particular, right? But it was a stage of essentially phishing compromises with some bad dependency management practices. You could have solved this. There's human way levels of solving this, but I think it comes also down to permissions management, who can access what in your team, who can upgrade what, and actually, I think an interesting point is we focus a lot on the backends and the infra, but we all use front-end code to interact with it, and this was actually a front-end compromise that in many ways got them. So that was an interesting case.
We're seeing that shift this year, aren't we?
Yeah.
It was very interesting to see the Reta report and that data. Matthias, I've known about you a lot longer.
Can I just add quickly?
Oh, please.
Yeah, just about OPSEC practices, that essentially one of biggest risks. I totally agree. And like probably not for security companies, but for companies. Like do not underestimate like human factor essentially. And obsec practices is, at least on my experience, like talking to many companies, is one of the weakest points for many of them. The problem is that it's not even public and not even like someone external, maybe out of good like intentions, might like criticize you or something like that.
Also, maybe just to add one comment, right? In aviation, they have this concept of the Swiss cheese model, right? So, basically they have like, for an accident to happen, like you basically have to have all layers of Swiss cheese aligned so that all the holes align, and only then a hack can happen. Unfortunately, I guess in this scenario, we're still oftentimes there where we just have one layer of Swiss cheese, right? And as long as there's one hole in the layer, everything is fucked. So I guess like part of it is also getting to a system where one layer can fail and there's still like 2, 3, 4 more layers available.
Or what if like the layers are connected in a unified security system? How about that? Would that be a better world? But anyway, I want to come to Matthias. Great points, guys. So Matthias is, and I haven't mentioned this to you. When I was getting into Immunefi, I was looking at, I was reading about people who were experts in this space. And your work was inspiring. So I read a lot about ChainSecurity way back before I actually decided to partner and work with you guys. So I'm very keen to hear your point of view. What do you think founders miss when it comes to thinking about security throughout their build process?
I mean, many things were mentioned. I'm not going to repeat them, and it is all true. I think we started with smart contracts and audits being required because it was that new thing, right? And which had no protection at all. You could always attack them 24/7. There was no traditional security around them. That was a new paradigm. You had to realize that open source code opens up a lot of new vulnerabilities and creativity from hackers and defenders, right? So this was starting 2016 with DAO-Hack and some kind of started our whole industry of audits. And nowadays, if the main thing I can add here is we must think of the users. Do you think like Save thought about Bybit using them, right? No. I mean, that is kind of a weird assumption that like a centralized exchange of that size would use your wallet, right? But again, these threats are out there, and we introduce so many single point of failures. Often, yes, of course, the human aspect is obviously one which can be tricked, right? But on so many levels, in so many ways, right? And what we build is, I mean, you brought it up, like a single layer of Swiss cheese. It's often that we have like not 1 or 2 single point of failures, but like 10, right? And can you protect them all? No, of course not. They'll always find some way to compromise them. I'm also worried, for example, about us as a security company being compromised, or like imagine Immunefi getting compromised, right? All the white hats who report, like, I mean, what do we have?
That's how I lost my hair.
Yeah. So these kind of things, single point of failures, I think we should systematically try to get rid of them and get better at that, right?
How can we though? Like, I mean, is there a way to systematically get rid of these single point of failures or not? I mean, in theory at least.
Yeah, I think so, because for example, one thing, right? Now, if you interact with your favorite DeFi protocol, you will go to their website. And hopefully, if you go to the phishing website, you will be protected, right? You will notice your wallet might tell you, or not, right? It's a race. But if instead we push people to say, look, a website is inherently hard to secure. Demand from your DeFi project to provide an app, like a phone app, much easier, much more secure platform, much slower cycle of like, can you update, right? the Bybit hack of JavaScript injection. That's not as easy, if not almost impossible, with a like 1 week launch process through the App Store. So we can, I think, systematically think of it. We are working also with the Ethereum Foundation on this $1 trillion security to systematically say, like, hey, these are the things where we need to think differently and stop trying to apply like Band-Aid, 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 right? So, but it's a start of a journey, and yeah, it's just crazy how much we have lost. So we need to get going.
If I can just add a little bit on that, I think most companies, for example, we work with a bunch of wallets. We integrate a block list with them, but we typically like encourage people to use multiple solutions in place. Like, I think if anybody's trying to sell you like we've solved all the issues, like they're just lying to you, And so, we encourage them to use like our data, other people's data. We actually all collaborate with Seal in terms of the Security Alliance and like a shared kind of data layer with different security companies. And then this is specific to wallets, but this is more example is that, you should still build out your own internal, security systems. You can't always entirely rely on an external vendor to solve every single issue, because what if there's a compromise of that vendor? What if they just their product roadmap diverges from the type of threats your users are seeing, right? And so I think one, we need to collaborate more as security companies, and also if you're looking at multiple vendors, look at this can be difficult, obviously, with budgets and all this other stuff, but see how you can, have, again, multiple layers of security. No one vendor is perfect. Yeah.
I mean, we wholeheartedly agree, because when we were coming up with the thesis of Magnus, one of the arcs we were working on was Immunefi builds it all, right? We just go ahead and build the entire point solution stack ourselves. One, that would be very expensive. To come up with products that would be very competitive in the category. There's already plenty of sort of providers in the space who are much better, who already have a refined product. And secondly, we also believe the same thing, which is at the end of the day, we want to work as a unifying layer. We want to help aggregate the data to create one holistic view about a protocol or project security posture. And that can have immensely useful applications in the future, from creating better bug bounty cover, hack insurance products on chain, compliance products on chain, but also, right, helping identify the action, the right signal at the right time. So let's see how we go along with it. So far, it looks really good. But talking about what we heard here today, we've heard about those single points of failures. We've heard about being more responsive, and we've also seen at Immunefi, when we talk to we have over 300 protocols using Immunefi, so we talk to a lot of customers all the time. We've seen them saying that they've just moved from a worldview where it's just a bug bounty and audit to a lot more tools they use across the development cycle. And, responsive security or I'd say preventative security is becoming even more important. I'd like to dive into that with Matthias. I'd love to get your point of view. So, where do you see the line between traditional audits and this more live defense? And do you think they're going to be kind of melding together over time? How does that evolution take place? We're seeing stuff like AI security engineers coming up, which is not replacing audits right now. Very clearly, their effectiveness is not at the level that is needed. But how do you see this space evolving? How do you see audits evolving in the future?
Audits. Yeah, very good question. So I firmly believe, at least on the smart contract side, it's a lot more static than a dynamic defense. So it must be safe by default. Yeah. And we have seen it now, the race against hackers to try to prevent an ongoing attack is almost by the definition, by the goals of blockchains, impossible to win. You want blockchains to be like censorship resistant, and with that comes that hackers can do what they want to do. So there, I don't believe in on-chain firewalls. I don't believe in like monitoring for pending transactions. It is a great step until you use it, and then it becomes so quickly useless. We have seen this in the novel hacks. It's this ship has like this is gone, right? So I think we need to invest our resources very carefully to compete with hackers who are very well funded by now, and who are very smart too, and think about where does it have really a lot of impact.
So if I am a builder who's raised a nice batch of $10 million of funding, right, and I'm getting to my MVP, how do I spend like 100% of my security budget? Where do you think I should be spending the money? All on audits?
So it really depends. You shouldn't. You need to think of it as like you build a dam, right? And if audit is like one hill, right? But if water flows in all around you, because you build a tower here, it's useless, right? So this. You need to also know when to use which audit. You mentioned like Immunefi will have audits. They are likely targeting like an earlier level, right? So
now
if you have 10 million to build a product, that's awesome, right? That's
$1
like
trillion
a lot of money. But
seems
you
like
might
a pretty
spend
simple
half of that on marketing because that's what you have to do, and a little bit on building, a little bit on security. But in the end, you might attract 100 million TVL. Then you are in big trouble. If you attract 10K in TVL, you are in big trouble for a different reason, right? But you need to adjust your security spending to the amount of money you think you want to secure with that. It needs to be balanced with that, because we know, like for example, we are the main auditor of what's now Sky, right? Maker, and they invest a lot, but their TVL is a lot, right? Their income is a lot. They can afford that. Aave is the same, like Curve is the same, and so on, right? You do have these systems, but you start out, you need to be strategic about where you put your money. Don't put it all in an audit, because, I mean, we all know your first product is not your last. It will iterate, so prepare for that.
Before we go to Nikita, I want to switch this over because I'm very curious, right? Like so Fedor and Markus, right? How, if you were to go back and you were like at the very start of your development cycle and you had $100 to spend on security, right? Just $100. How would you plan on splitting that? Because I've gotten like Matthias' point of view. I just want to get your point of view. How much of that goes to responsive or preventative defense, automated tooling versus audits or bug bounties? Very curious to hear your point of view.
Just $100?
That's just like theoretical. $100, 100%.
Okay, so to be honest, I don't think that I would like to make pretty different comparing to what we did. So we started with smart contract audits as our like priority. We weren't probably so sure in our efforts that we like had proper probably expertise inside of the team. So that gave us confidence in the first place, and we chose like not by the badge which we are looking to put on our website, for example, or like just official credibility. We were looking for quality of it, and it's like we learned a lot. After that, we started to improve our overall practices, like tests, like learning the team, not probably the direct expenses for that, but after that, like guys, external auditors were helping us with pen testing, with like DevOps, OPSEC practices, and so on and so on. So
you mentioned OPSEC twice, so that's going to be something in my mind going forward.
Yes, and sorry, pretty quickly to add, like, it's, in my opinion, it shouldn't be from the very beginning, but pretty quickly, like alongside improving the product, you need to add some metrics, like if something like failing because of technical reasons, but not because of the hacks, but also some basic, metrics in case like something drastically like dropping in TVL or on some of your pools. It might be definitely indications that something goes wrong. Maybe not a hack, but economically still worth to take a look.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's basic. It's definitely iterative. So it's interesting that you said $100, right? Because at the end of the day, it really depends on your funding, right? Like how much money do you have available to spend on security? Because the amount is basically limitless, right? You could spend billions on security and always improve some aspect, right? And at the beginning, when you're just alone, you're a co-founder. Well, you're not going to be spending $0, right, on security. You're probably barely testing your product, right? You're just getting it out there. You also don't really have users yet, so it's fine. So I mean, it depends how your company grew, I guess, right? Like, do you have immediately hundreds of users that you have to protect and millions of funding, or do you grow more organically? So yeah, I mean, the first line, at the very, very, very beginning, like the first step for security is just testing. Right.
And I can add, I have a tip for you. If you have $100 really to spend on security, you buy a nice bottle of wine or like chocolate or whatever is the favorite thing of that friend you have who's really good at security. Because in the Ethereum community, it's really super supportive, right? And then you have a nice dinner, whatever, and you kindly ask them to take a look.
Good.
And this is the absolute best return you can have for $100, right? Yeah. And then we know, like, projects get started with a lot of support from friends, and we tend to found our companies together with friends and so on, right?
Okay, what's your favorite wine once again?
I don't disagree with
chocolate.
That. Okay. Okay, let's talk briefly about the idea of unifying the security stack. That's what we're on the road towards, and I'd like to start with Nikita, right? Because we recently announced our partnership. We'll be integrating ChainPatrol on Magnus. Other than myself, what inspired you to partner with Immunefi? and
wine.
And what value do you think ChainPatrol brings to the Magnus stack?
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw a very collaborative effort here. I think, one of the things that we actually heard from many of our own customers is that, the amount of various security tools and different things that they need to kind of manage is kind of growing. We have our own app, our own dashboards. They really like those. But, as, anybody running security at a protocol, then just the number of tools you have to kind of manage and keep track of is growing. And so I think... I really like the overall idea behind Magnus of like becoming the command center, in a way of across your security stack. And, there's this whole like alert fatigue that happens and all these other things where there's just too many different tools to track. And so I think helping kind of organize all these different pieces, bring them into one kind of unified area, it made a lot of sense. And for us, it was really, a way to make sure that we can work with more of these companies. We can, bring forward, I think Magnus has this interesting position of being able to highlight to companies what are the missing areas of their security stack. Everybody knows you need the audit. Everybody has most companies now have bug bounties, but then there's like other areas that they need to bring in, and by creating this area where you can highlight what the different areas of you really are creating, like, hey, like the sidebar is your security stack, and that, I mean, that's important because now for even newer projects, especially, I think, that are coming in, they have no idea what to do. Like a lot of companies like are made by oftentimes by fairly young founders that they're very good at one specific area that they do, but they haven't had the time to learn everything that comes to like security or other areas of what they're building. And so having this very sensible starting point is great. And I think for us, I think it's just really about that speed. The faster we can alert the company that something is going wrong. We're looking at, one, we do a lot of stuff behind the scenes with just like block listing malicious domains, but we're also looking at things like, your DNS might have been compromised, your website's been hacked, your Twitter profile's been hacked. This has happened to like every major company in the space. You're almost like in the minority now if your Twitter hasn't been hacked. And being able to deliver that alert to the customer, to the organization is very important, right? And it's a higher chance of success if they have like a primary place they're going to for all their alerting and everything that, like their core command center, I would say.
Matthias, what about you? I mean, what in the future we're building for, right, with Magnus, what role do you see auditors playing at the highest level?
It's an interesting question. So the security is a lot about trust, and I think we neglect the human element of trust a little bit when we try to build platforms which are independent of that. If you have a decent amount of money, you tend to have a person you can call at a bank, right? And if on chain, like you can't call Ethereum Foundation, right? You can't do all of this. So for projects, I see auditors as their core security contact. They are the ones who know the project in and out. Of course, I must say, they don't know the project in and out from the product side at all. They know it from the security side, from this core Web3 component, right? Not the Web2 part, but we should expand to this. But they keep this role of like trusted partner. You can call if something hits the fan, and who help you when the need comes, right? This is something which I firmly believe in. Like as an auditor, you have that point in time where you need to secure the project and you get paid for it, and then on you have the duty to be there when it's needed for the project and help them when. You know, like you said, right? Founders can't know this, and no one in the project can know this. You, as a security professional inside an audit company, you deal with that day in and day out, right? So obviously, in that moment, be there and help, right? So this I think could be like this trusted role for projects as an auditor.
No, that's great to hear.
Yeah, there might be an interesting business model of like keeping like a post-audit retainer. I don't know if this is something that's like done commonly right now, but it's like, you know, at a certain point, your auditor might know your protocol as well or better than many of your engineers. And so when an emergency happens, like, who do you even call to like do emergency like support, recovery, triaging, this kind of stuff? You know, hopefully you have people on your team that can do that, but I don't know if anybody like has done anything with like auditors on retainer or just like external security. I've seen some companies do like security consultants on retainer that are just like there for emergency support.
I'm really curious, relying on your experience as security expert, how many teams like making critical part of infrastructure on chain, for example, and don't have enough internal expertise to manage it? Like, to me, it sounds already pretty strange.
I mean, I do think a lot of teams do have like a lot of experts internally, like some to the points where I think I was talking to like people at Lido and they were like, you know, we actually train up our auditors internally entirely. Like, you know, they do have external auditors, but they have like an internal audit school, you know, where they have to train people up because the protocol is so big at a certain point, like 4 weeks or something of somebody looking at it is not really enough time. But I imagine at earlier stages, you know, we focus more on like the social engineering side. To be honest, like in our area, we often have like CISOs and others coming to us being like, we have no clue what to do when like something gets like hacked or like, because this is there's an area that they are experts in, you know, which is oftentimes the contracts that they build, but they have to use a whole bunch of other tooling in their day-to-day life, or their OPSEC, for example. That's an area oftentimes they don't have as much expertise in. So the on-chain stuff I'm not maybe as familiar with, but with the social engineering and other side, there is kind of like people are looking for.
Okay.
Yeah, I can add one more thing. We do have fluctuation, right? So people come and leave, and as a project gets older, the people from the early days might have left, right? And it heavily depends. Very, very few projects take the Lido approach of consistent internal training of their people to be security aware. And what we have heard again and again from clients, even up to maker level, right, where they say, look, you are still around. You have been auditing us when we started all of this in 2018, and no one from the original team is here anymore, but the auditors are still around. And this expertise and this like trust in that continuity you can have, because as ChainSecurity, you have less fluctuation, right? It's a service-based business, and it's not as quick as like you join a project, you build a product, you leave, you get hired away, right? Of course, we try really hard to make it a place where you want to stay forever, right? And we have basically no fluctuation in our employees. But so this is something very valuable, I find, and something where you can add a lot of benefit, especially to younger teams who do make their own mistakes along the way, but you can kind of be a lot of that collective memory during their time. Some superstar projects, they can maintain that on their own, but for many, it's not, they aren't Lidos, right? And you are much more efficient by keeping that knowledge around with support of long-term security partners, I believe.
Well, gentlemen, the sun has gone down and the party is getting on. So I'm going to ask you guys to give your one-line pitch for how do you solve for securing the next decatrillion on-chain. You guys know our pitch, right? They're going to unify on-chain security with Magnus. That's our pitch. That's a one-liner. What's yours? One-liner.
So my current one is build apps, not websites.
Our goal is that in every interaction you have, you're going to know if it's real or if it's somebody fake, and we're just going to end phishing.
Yeah, so the question is how to boost the security for younger teams, or just
For onboarding the next decatrillion dollars on chain, unlocking institutional capital, let the floodgates open.
well, sorry for a longer speech. But it really depends. Depends on the domain company operating, depends on the, like, I don't know, focus, like, for example, working with money, without money. Like, it's really hard to give one-line pitch. Probably, again, sorry for if it's not really the context. But in short, what I see, especially in younger companies, like, they, like, let's say, treating elementary, like, practices too late. For example, like, start writing basic tests from the very beginning, ideally, especially if you're working with money or customers, I don't know, assets or whatever. Like, create like dedicated environment to test like on real, I don't know, blockchains, etc. in isolated one manually, for example. That's already will cover like a lot, actually.
All right, you had a longer one, so I make it very short. It's just one word, KISS. So keep it simple, stupid.
And yeah, okay. Though on that note, it was a pleasure hosting you guys. I've learned a lot here, and I look forward to working with you guys in some capacity. Right? I think we already have a lot going on, so I'm very curious to what the future brings. And to the folks who have been here with us, if you're building in Web3 apps, not websites, please reach out if you're looking for simpler, unified on-chain security, and also to the folks who will watch this later. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.